If you enjoy these deep dives into historical moments, consider following the channel for more stories like this. The year was 1985. Seattle was a city living in the damp, gray shadow of the Cascade Mountains. Not yet the neon-bright emblem of global technology and grunge music it would become. It was a city of Boeing engineers, University of Washington academics, and a burgeoning, almost pretentious coffee culture. The air smelled of wet pine and dark roast coffee beans. Arthur Friedman felt he was a man perfectly in tune with his city. At 34, he was the manager of the Starbucks on University Avenue, or the U District store. In 1985, this was not the global empire it is today. It was a local brand, a purveyor of serious coffee for serious people. Arthur was a true believer. He believed in the Starbucks experience, which, at the time, meant a rigorous adherence to bean quality, the precise temperature of the water, and the exact crema on an espresso pull. His world was one of inventory sheets, employee schedules, and the meticulous, almost sacred ritual of the daily roast. Arthur was, by nature, an observer of systems. His store was his system. He knew the precise cost per cup of his house blend, the exact time the morning rush would peak, 7:53 a.m., driven by the UW senior-level engineering courses, and which of his baristas was best at educating a customer on the difference between a Sumatra Mandaling and a Kenya AA. He was a good manager, fair, exacting, and utterly dedicated to the company's nascent, high-minded principles. Into this meticulously controlled environment, Alex Cole had arrived 3 months prior. On paper, Alex was a perfect, if uninspiring, hire. 24 years old, listed a transient-sounding address in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, and had a sparse work history, a stint at a bookstore, some temp work, the usual aimless narrative of a young man in a port city. During the interview, he had been quiet, almost blank. He seemed to listen more than he spoke. He wasn't enthusiastic, but he was attentive. Arthur, mistaking this blankness for malleable potential, had hired him. Alex learned the job with an unsettling speed. He mastered the finicky La Marzocco espresso machine in a single day. His milk steaming was flawless, his measurements exact. He was never late. He was never sick. But he was also absent. He was a void. He spoke only when required, his voice a flat, Midwestern-sounding monotone that offered no hint of a past. His co-workers, mostly chatty college students, found him creepy and weird, but Arthur valued his efficiency. The U District store was a hub. It wasn't a lounge. In 1985, Starbucks was still primarily a bean roaster, and the small espresso bar was an accessory. But its clientele was specific. It served the professors from the university, many working on government research grants. It served engineers and technicians from the avionics contractors that supplied Boeing. It served a handful of quiet, bookish men whom Arthur assumed were from the Slavic Studies department. It was a crossroads of the city's intellectual and technical elite. Arthur Friedman, standing behind the counter with his clipboard, watched his system run. He watched the beans grind, the steam hiss, the money change hands. He watched his efficient, quiet barista, Alex Cole, serve a short espresso to a man who Arthur recognized as a regular, a stressed-looking technician from a Boeing subcontractor. Everything was as it should be. Everything was under control. Arthur's world was built on a foundation of predictable patterns. The morning rush, the 3 p.m. lull, the precise weight of a 1-pound bag of beans, which should, he insisted, be 1.02 pounds to account for bag weight, a detail his staff forever ignored. Alex Cole began to disrupt these patterns, not through error, but through a perfection that seemed to have the wrong focus. The first oddity was Alex's relationship with the trash. Arthur was strict about waste management, meaning he didn't want employees throwing away perfectly good beans or spilling milk. Alex, however, had his own interpretation. Arthur noticed him, on several occasions, retrieving specific items from the customer trash can: a crumpled newspaper, a discarded coffee cup, a napkin. Once, Arthur confronted him. "Alex, what are you doing? If it's in the bin, it stays in the bin. Health code." Alex didn't look up, his hand still inside the metal flap. He produced a small, folded schedule for a local bus route. "Customer dropped this. Looked important. Thought I'd put it on the counter." He said it with such bland logic that Arthur was left feeling foolish. even though the explanation felt thin. Why that customer? Why that piece of paper? Then there were the regulars Alex cultivated. It wasn't the usual barista customer banter. Arthur's other employees knew their regulars by name, their drink, their major, their dog's name. Alex's regulars were different. They were quiet, drab men who often came in alone. They would order the simplest thing, a black coffee, a tea, and would stand by the condiment bar. Arthur watched one such interaction. A man in a plain, slightly ill-fitting suit, the kind that tried to look expensive but was just functional, was adding sugar to his coffee. Alex was wiping down the counter nearby. No words were exchanged, but the man's hand, holding the sugar packet, hovered over his cup for 3 full seconds. Alex's wiping rag paused for the exact same duration. Then the moment passed. The man drank his coffee and left. It was nothing. It was a pause. It was a hiccup in the rhythm of the store, a beat missed. The most concrete event occurred on a rainy Tuesday. A customer, a regular who Arthur knew worked at a small avionics firm, left his briefcase by a chair. It was a common forgetful mistake. The man had been gone for 10 minutes before Alex noticed it. "Arthur, a customer forgot this," Alex called out, his voice flat. "Fine, put it in the back office. He'll be back for it," Arthur said, tallying the register. "The lock is high quality," Alex observed, his hand resting on the handle. "A German brand. Very precise." Arthur looked up. Alex was staring at the small 3-digit combination lock on the briefcase with an unnerving intensity. It wasn't the casual curiosity of a young man. It was the focused, appraising gaze of a jeweler. "It's probably just his lunch, Alex," Arthur said, annoyed. "Put it in the office, now." Alex complied, but the moment stuck with Arthur. It wasn't what Alex had said, but how. It was a flicker of a different person, a specialist, emerging from the blank facade of the barista. Later that day, when the flustered engineer returned for his case, Arthur watched Alex hand it over. "Glad I didn't lose this," the engineer laughed nervously. "It's got all my notes in it." "You should be more careful," Alex replied. There was no warmth in it. It wasn't a friendly warning. It was a statement, an assessment of a vulnerability. Arthur, counting out change, felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. He was a manager of a coffee shop, but for a brief second, the air in the store felt less like a café and more like a customs checkpoint. Arthur Friedman was a man of the ledger. His true solace was in the back office, a cramped, windowless room that smelled of cardboard and stale coffee. He sat under a single fluorescent bulb, reconciling the week's inventory and cash register tapes. This was his sanctuary, where the messy world of human interaction was reduced to clean, definitive numbers. It was during one of these late-night sessions, with the Seattle rain drumming against the back door, that Arthur found the pattern. He was cross-referencing cash-out slips with the register tapes, a redundant check he performed because he didn't entirely trust his assistant manager. He noticed an anomaly. Every second Wednesday for the past 6 weeks at exactly 4:15 p.m., a single transaction for 1 short latte, extra hot, no foam, was processed. This was not, in itself, unusual. The drink order, however, was peculiar. A no-foam latte was a contradiction in terms, a sign of a customer who didn't understand the product. But the consistency was what flagged it for Arthur. Wed, Oct. 9, 4:15 p.m., $185, paid with $5 hours, change, $3.15. Wed, Oct. 23, 4:15 p.m., $185, paid with 5 hours, change, $3.15. Wed, Nov. 6, 4:15 p.m., $185, paid with 5 hours, change, $3.15. He pulled the work schedules. Alex Cole was the barista on the register for all 3 transactions. Arthur's mind, trained to spot waste and inefficiency, saw this as a potential cash handling problem. Was Alex running a scam? Was he voiding the sale and pocketing the 5? But the numbers balanced. The $5 was registered, the $185 was accounted for, and the $3.15 and change was presumably returned. It was a clean transaction. Too clean. Arthur was a manager, not a detective. His first instinct was not espionage, but employee error. He decided to do a surprise deep clean of the back room and store equipment, a management tactic to find hidden stashes of, well, he wasn't sure what. He started in the back room. He wiped shelves, reorganized boxes of filters, and checked the seals on the 10-pound bags of coffee. He moved to the spare espresso machine, an older model they kept for parts. It was heavy, and as he wrestled with it, trying to clean the floor underneath, his hand brushed against the underside of the unit. His fingers found something that shouldn't be there. Taped deep inside the hollow metal frame, far from casual view, was a small waterproof packet, the kind a hiker might use for matches. It was black electrical tape, holding a small, plastic-wrapped object. Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs. The rain outside seemed to fade, replaced by the buzzing of the fluorescent light. This was not a misplaced tip envelope. This was hidden. His hands trembled as he worked the tape loose. The packet fell into his palm. It was small, light. Inside the plastic, he could feel a hard, cylindrical object. Carefully, he unpeeled the tape and unwrapped the plastic. It was a single, tiny roll of undeveloped 35mm film, the kind used in Minox's spy cameras. It was no bigger than his thumb. Arthur stared at it. This was not a management problem. This was not an inventory discrepancy. This was something else. This was a thing from movies, from Tom Clancy novels. This was a thing that did not belong in his world of coffee beans and steaming wands. His first thought was to call the police. But what would he say? "I found film in my espresso machine." They would think he was a crank. His second thought was to confront Alex. But the image of Alex's cold, assessing eyes and his comment on the German lock flashed in Arthur's mind. Confrontation felt unwise. He did the only thing his terrified, process-oriented mind could think of. He put it back. He meticulously retaped the packet. He wrapped it in the plastic. He shoved it back up into the hollow frame, his fingers fumbling. He pushed the espresso machine back into place. He went back to his office, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't hold his pen. The numbers on the ledger blurred. The world, which had been so clean and orderly, was suddenly, terrifyingly, out of alignment. The discovery of the film canister fundamentally altered Arthur's perception. His store was no longer a café, it was a stage. He was no longer a manager. He was an unwilling audience member, or perhaps a prop. He couldn't go to the authorities. The fear of ridicule was potent, but it was secondary to a deeper, more primal fear, the fear of being wrong and the even greater fear of being right. He began to watch Alex. It was a clumsy, amateur surveillance. Arthur, a man who believed in direct feedback and clear policies, was now engaged in the act of spying. He pretended to be organizing the retail bags of coffee near the front window, just to watch Alex interact with the clientele. He would forget items in the back room to have an excuse to go back and observe Alex on the floor. He started to categorize Alex's regulars. There was the professor, a man from the UW Slavic Studies department, who always bought a pound of Russian-sounding coffee and would exchange a few low-voiced words with Alex in what sounded like Russian. Arthur had assumed it was a student practicing. Now he wasn't so sure. There was the technician, the same man who had left the briefcase. He came in every Friday. He always looked pale, and he always ordered a large black coffee. He and Alex never spoke. But Arthur noticed that after the technician left, Alex would immediately take his break. And there was the delivery driver, a woman in a generic brown uniform who dropped off boxes of cups and lids. She would always have Alex sign the manifest. But one day Arthur saw it. The woman passed Alex the clipboard, and as Alex signed, the woman's finger tapped a specific spot on the invoice. A simple, non-verbal cue. Alex nodded, a barely perceptible dip of his chin. The exchange lasted less than 2 seconds. Arthur's paranoia bloomed in the damp Seattle winter. He too started adopting a new routine. After his shift, he wouldn't go straight home. He would sit in his 1979 Ford Fairmont, parked across the street, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee from the 7-Eleven down the block. He felt disloyal, but he couldn't bear to drink his own store's coffee anymore. He watched his own store. One night, he followed Alex. He felt like a fool, his headlights dimmed, staying 2 cars back. Alex, however, didn't go home to the Capitol Hill address. He took a bus heading away from Capitol Hill. He got off in a nondescript neighborhood in Ballard, an area of fishing docks and working-class homes. Alex's movements were odd. He walked for 3 blocks, then abruptly turned and walked back. He stopped at a newspaper box, pretended to read the headline, but his eyes were scanning the street. He entered a laundromat, sat for 2 minutes, and left without any laundry. Arthur, parked half a block away and sinking in his seat, recognized the behavior. He'd seen it in a movie. It was a surveillance detection route. Alex was checking if he was being followed. Arthur's blood ran cold. He fumbled with his keys, started his car, and drove away, his tires screeching faintly on the wet pavement. He had his answer. This was not a disaffected youth. This was not a simple employee. This was someone who knew the rules, someone who lived in a world of shadows. And Arthur, the coffee manager, had just driven his loud, terribly obvious Ford Fairmont right into the middle of it. He was convinced Alex had seen him. He didn't sleep that night. He lay awake, listening to the rain, wondering if a man who could master a La Marzocco machine in a day and run a counter-surveillance route in Ballard would have any trouble dealing with a meddling manager. The next 2 days at the store were a quiet torment. Arthur expected Alex to behave differently. He expected a sign, a threat, a knowing glance that said, "I saw you." But there was nothing. Alex was the same as he'd always been, quiet, efficient, and blank. He made espressos, wiped counters, and emptied the trash. The normality was, in itself, terrifying. Alex's control over his own facade was total. It made Arthur feel clumsy, hysterical. The tension in Arthur's mind was becoming unbearable. He was snapping at the other baristas, micromanaging the foam on the cappuccinos, and recounting the register 3-4 times a shift. He was a man unraveling, and his store, his perfect system, was unraveling with him. The confrontation, when it finally came, was not the one Arthur had been dreading. It wasn't about film canisters or following someone in Ballard. It was, appropriately, about coffee. It was a Thursday afternoon, a slow, gray period. The technician, the pale, nervous engineer, came in. He looked worse than usual, his face slick with a nervous sweat despite the cold. He approached the counter where Alex was working. Arthur was busy restocking Sumatra beans, his back to them, but he was listening. The technician mumbled, I need a large black coffee." Alex, who was polishing the espresso machine, replied without looking at him, "We are out of the house blend." Arthur froze, his hand deep in the bin of dark beans. This was a lie, a blatant, pointless lie. The house blend was their main product. There were 2 full urns brewing not 5 feet away. The technician's voice was strained, high-pitched. "Oh, okay, then just anything. A Kenya. Is the Kenya okay?" "The Kenya is fine," Alex said. He poured the coffee. The technician paid, his hand shaking, and left in a hurry. The lie was so bizarre, so operationally unnecessary, that it short-circuited Arthur's fear and reignited his managerial instincts. This was a breach of protocol. This was bad customer service. He waited until the store was empty, save for the 2 of them. He walked from the bean bin to the counter. He was shaking, but this time it was with a cold, righteous anger. "Alex," he said. His voice was too loud in the quiet store. Alex turned, his face placid. "Yes, Arthur." "Why did you tell that man we were out of the house blend?" Alex didn't blink. "I was mistaken. I thought the urn was empty." "It's not empty. I brewed it myself 20 minutes ago. You lied to a customer." Arthur wanted Alex to be flustered. He wanted him to apologize, to make an excuse. He wanted a normal employee interaction. Instead, Alex held his gaze. The barista mask didn't just slip. It evaporated. The person looking at Arthur was not a 24-year-old drifter. It was someone ancient, tired, and profoundly dangerous. It was the same look Arthur had seen when Alex assessed the German lock, an evaluation. But this time, the object being evaluated was Arthur. "It was a mistake," Alex repeated, his voice dropping half an octave, losing its flat, Midwestern quality and gaining something else. A faint, almost imperceptible accent. "It will not happen again." The air in the store was thick, static. Arthur realized his mistake. He hadn't been confronting an employee about a customer service issue. He had been interrupting a signal. He had been interfering in a transaction that had nothing to do with coffee. The house blend was code. Kenya was code. And he, the manager, had just announced to the world that he was listening. "See that it doesn't," Arthur stammered, his managerial authority sounding pathetic even to his own ears. He retreated to the back office, his heart feeling like a trapped bird. He locked the door. He sat in the dark, his breath catching in his throat. He had just confirmed his suspicions in the most dangerous way possible. He had let the spy know he was being watched. Arthur did not go to work the next day. He called in sick, a genuine physical sickness born of pure terror. He sat in his apartment watching the phone, convinced that Alex or someone far worse would come knocking. No one did. The silence was, in its own way, worse. He spent the day in a state of suspended animation. He couldn't eat. He couldn't read. He just watched the gray Seattle rain streak down his windows. He had stumbled into a war, a real one, and he had no weapons. By Saturday, he had convinced himself he was being hysterical. Alex was just a weird kid. The film was probably for an art project. The code was just a simple mistake. He was a manager and he had a store to run. He put on his tie, drank a glass of water, and drove to the U District. He arrived at 5:30 a.m. to open the store. It was dark, the streetlights casting lonely orange pools on the wet pavement. As he approached the front door, key in hand, he saw that the door was slightly ajar. A cold dread, more potent than anything he'd felt before, washed over him. He hadn't been paranoid enough. He pushed the door open. "Hello?" he called out. His voice was a weak croak. The store was dark. The power was on. The espresso machine's pilot light glowed, but the main lights were off. "Mr. Friedman?" A voice from the shadows. Arthur fumbled for the light switch. Two men were sitting at one of the small tables. They were in dark, conservative suits. They looked like government accountants. They were not drinking coffee. Who are you?" "The store is closed," Arthur managed. "My name is Agent Miller," the older man said. He had a voice like gravel. "This is Agent Davies. We are with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We let ourselves in. We need to talk to you." The relief was so profound, Arthur felt his knees buckle. He leaned against the counter. "The police, Alex, is he?" "Mr. Cole is not your concern, Mr. Friedman," Agent Davies, the younger one, said. He had a legal pad and a pen. "Your concern is your cooperation. We have closed the store for the day. There's a closed for maintenance sign on the door. You are going to sit down and you are going to tell us everything you know about Alex Cole." They weren't there for him. They were there because of Alex. But they were talking to him. "Where is he? Did you arrest him?" Arthur asked, his voice shaking. Agent Miller gave him a look of profound weariness. "We've been aware of Mr. Cole, or, as we know him, Senior Lieutenant Alexei Volkov of the KGB's Directorate S, for 18 months. We've been building a case. We've been watching this location. We've been watching you." Arthur's world tilted. They had been watching him. His clumsy surveillance in the Ford Fairmont, his late-night inventory. They had seen it all. Why didn't you?" "Because, Mr. Friedman," Miller cut in. "This location was an active communications hub. Volkov wasn't the target. He was the handler. He was coordinating a network. His job as a barista was a perfect cover. He met with assets. He passed signals. He managed dead drops. And we let him because we were busy identifying the assets." "The film," Arthur whispered. "In the espresso machine." Both agents looked at him. Davies stopped writing. "What film?" Miller's voice was sharp. "In the spare machine. In the back. A small canister. I found it 2 days ago. I put it back." Miller and Davies exchanged a look. It was not a look of triumph. It was a look of pure, bureaucratic annoyance. "You what?" Davies said. "You found an intelligence dead drop, and you left it?" "I didn't know," Arthur protested. I don't know what I thought." Agent Miller stood up and walked behind the counter. He went to the back room. Arthur heard the sound of the heavy espresso machine being scraped across the floor. Miller returned a moment later, holding the small plastic-wrapped packet. He held it up. "You stumbled into a federal counterintelligence operation, Mr. Friedman," Miller said, his voice cold. "You were observed following the subject. You compromised the integrity of the evidence. Your little confrontation, On Thursday, forced our hand. What? The technician? Davies said, picking up the thread. His name is David Bishop, an engineer at Boeing Avionics with a gambling problem and a high-level clearance. He was Volkov's primary asset. When you confronted Volkov about the house blend, which was the all-clear signal, Volkov had to abort. He gave the danger signal, Kenya. Bishop panicked. He ran. We were forced to pick them both up last night, 6 weeks before we were ready. Arthur Friedman sank into a chair. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a spy. He was a complication. He was the fool in the coffee-stained apron who had, through his obsessive-compulsive managing, ruined a multi-year FBI sting. The sun rose, but the closed-for-maintenance sign kept the world at bay. The U-District Starbucks, Arthur's temple of efficiency, had been converted into a makeshift interrogation room. The agents were methodical. They were not good cop, bad cop. They were just cop. They were a system, vast and impersonal, and Arthur was a piece of data they needed to process. Agent Miller drank the coffee Arthur made for him, a perfect Sumatra, and grimaced. Too bitter. How do people drink this? The debriefing lasted for hours. They went over every detail, every memory Arthur had of Alex. Tell us about the professor, Davies said, pen poised over his legal pad. Dr. Ilyich? From UW. He came in for coffee. He spoke Russian with Alex. He was Volkov's immediate superior, Miller said flatly. A legal officer with the Seattle consulate, using his academic cover to run the illegal network. We've known about him for years. And the delivery driver? Arthur asked, emboldened. A cutout, a courier, not important. Now back to the film. You touched it? Yes, with my bare hands. Miller sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Of course you did. They made Arthur describe the house blend versus Kenya incident. They had him recount the day Alex had appraised the German lock on the briefcase. They asked about the bus schedule retrieved from the trash. To Arthur, these had been isolated, terrifying oddities. To the agents, they were textbook tradecraft. The bus schedule was a signal for an in-person meet, Davies explained as if to a child. The briefcase was an assessment of opportunity. Volkov was evaluating whether he could gain access to Bishop's materials on site. The no-foam latte. A signal, Arthur said, finally understanding. Paid with a 5, change left. No, Miller said. The latte was just a latte. The tip jar was the dead drop. The asset would drop an item. Volkov would clear the jar at the end of his shift. Simple, low risk. Arthur felt a new wave of humiliation. He had been so proud of finding the pattern of the latte, and he'd even gotten that wrong. He had been focusing on the coffee, when the real transaction was the change. The agents were not interested in Arthur's feelings. They were interested in his system. They had him print out every employee schedule for the last 6 months. They took the ledger books. They confiscated the register tapes. They were mapping Arthur's world to find the shadows in theirs. Why here? Arthur finally asked, gesturing to the gleaming espresso machine. Why a Starbucks? Miller looked around the store, his gaze analytical. It's perfect. High volume, transient clientele. No one looks twice. The clientele you have, Boeing, UW, it's a target-rich environment. And the manager? He looked directly at Arthur. The manager is a non-entity, a person so focused on the minutia, on the beans, that he would never see the larger picture. He didn't say it as an insult. He said it as a fact. It was Alex Volkov's primary defense. The manager was just part of the scenery. You will not discuss this with anyone, Miller said as they began to pack their briefcases. Not your other employees, not your regional manager, not your family. As far as you're concerned, Alex Cole quit and the store had a plumbing emergency. What happens to Alex, to Volkov? He's a Soviet national with diplomatic adjacent status, captured engaging in espionage. He won't go to a normal prison. He'll be handled, Davies said. And David Bishop, the engineer? Agent Miller's face hardened. Mr. Bishop is a citizen who betrayed his country. His situation will be more permanent. You are done here, Mr. Friedman. Open your store tomorrow. Act normal. Forget this happened. They left. The closed sign still hung on the door. Arthur was alone in his store. It was immaculate. The agents hadn't left so much as a coffee ring, but the entire space felt violated. He looked at the espresso machine, the one that had held the film. He looked at the tip jar. He looked at the menu. It was all a lie. It was a stage, and his role, he now understood, was to be the unwitting fool. Acting normal was the hardest thing Arthur Friedman had ever been asked to do. When he reopened the store on Sunday, his other baristas, the chatty college students, bombarded him with questions. "Where's Alex? Did he quit?" "Yes," Arthur said, his voice a dry rasp. "He found a different opportunity." "What happened with the plumbing?" "The store smells fine." "It was a main line issue." "They fixed it," he lied. He was a bad liar. His employees sensed his agitation, his distraction, and chalked it up to managerial stress. But Arthur was living in a new reality. Every customer was a potential threat. Every quiet man in a suit was an agent. Every person who lingered too long by the condiment bar was, in his mind, signaling a dead drop. He found himself scrutinizing the tip jar, not for theft, but for tiny, rolled-up notes. He flinched at the sound of Russian. He couldn't look at the back room. He assigned the deep cleaning to his assistant manager. He couldn't touch the spare espresso machine. He eventually had it scrapped for parts, just to get it out of his store. His paranoia was compounded by a deep, unsettling sense of shame. The FBI had been clear. He had forced their hand. He had blown their operation. He couldn't shake the image of David Bishop, the terrified engineer. He had read in the paper that Bishop had been arrested in an internal corporate matter, which Arthur now knew was code. He wondered what would happen to him. His passion for the job was gone. It had been replaced by a gnawing anxiety. The Starbucks experience, which he had once preached with the zeal of a convert, now seemed like a hollow